Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel for another installment in our reviewed and ranked series. As you know, we've been progressing through the base roster for now, alphabetically, to determine just how useful each member of the Ultimate Alliance 3 roster is in terms of their moves, their abilities, and their overall viability for team building. And today is no exception, as we have the wonderful, whimsical Deadpool up for review. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and don't forget to leave a like on today's episode if you find it helpful and or enjoyable. And let's go ahead and talk about Deadpool in length. So the first thing that we need to talk about before we get into any of his moveset and how he actually behaves is we need to talk about his team synergies on the team building side of things. Now, Deadpool has 3 different synergies in the strength category and an additional 3 synergies split between 2 other categories. His strength synergies come within the X-Men, Antihero, and Cutting Edge synergies, whereas he has 2 vitality synergies with the Villains and the X-Force, and a final energy synergy with the Wisecracking Warriors within the cast. And having one character that has a potential for bolstering the team strength as heavily as he is definitely makes him worth some consideration at the very least when working through the roster. Deadpool also has the unique characteristic of being available right off the beginning of the game if you've purchased the DLC expansion before loading up your first save file. And that means that he can be kind of useful, as he does come available at level 20 with all of his abilities unlocked, so he's not the worst bet to have in the pool. That being said, if you are interested in speedrunning this game, especially in the new game categories, Deadpool is a banned character until you would otherwise unlock him normally, which is during the Xavier Mansion section of the fight. So do bear that in mind if that is a route that you are considering going. Now let's transition over and talk about Deadpool's kit and how he works. His basic attack sequence is a very unique one because it involves an alteration of a couple of melee hits as well as a couple of ranged projectile attacks. All in all, it is a 5-hit combo, though the 3rd hit in that combo is a 7-round burst from Deadpool's SMG. So in theory, you do have a very extensive combo with 11 total hits, but the bullets coming out of the SMG, they are lackluster in their damage on their own. So don't really count on that as being as integral as it otherwise might be. If we take a look at his heavy attack, we will notice that Deadpool lunges forward a good distance and unleashes 2 simultaneous katana slashes, and this does have a knockdown element to it and will push smaller enemies and grunt type characters back. Additionally, I do need to mention that his basic attacks will cause the enemies to stagger out as well, thus discouraging retaliation from even the standard basic enemies. Deadpool's jump animation is the first in this series that we've looked at so far where he has a teleportation active, meaning that upon activating a double jump, you will see Deadpool disappears and then reappears a few feet ahead of where he was in whichever direction he was facing. This tends to be interesting for a couple of traversal items. Characters with teleports tend to be the best for speedrun type games, though Deadpool does have a fairly slow teleport by all definitions of the movements. So if you want to really run him on your team, feel welcome to, though I don't think that he is the optimal choice when it comes to speedrunning characters. So pick your poison, I suppose. Out of either the standard jump or the double jump teleport, you can perform a falling aerial. This involves Deadpool magically pulling 2 hammers out of his kit of weapons and slams them down into the ground. This will create a spherical area of impact and knock the smaller grunt characters back as well. Though I've said this before and will continue to bring this up where necessary, Deadpool does not necessarily have any standard attacks that puts him up into the air, in which point you can then chain a falling aerial onto that. But to retcon that statement slightly, something that you will and may find usable is if you are teleporting around the battlefield using that double jump ability, then you may very well find yourself in circumstances where the falling aerial is indeed appropriate. And before we get into Deadpool's abilities, we do need to at least have a look at his block and dodge animation. This involves Deadpool crossing his weapons in front of him rather than his arms, causing a little cross between his katana and his SMG, and he does have that forward roll, as we've seen, consistent with a large selection of the cast that will bring him in the area of input upon choosing a direction when holding that block. Now let's go ahead and talk about Deadpool's abilities. And first up, we have the Slice and Dice ability. And as you're seeing it demonstrated right now, it doesn't look super impressive. And that is because this attack is highly dependent on having enemies locally for the character to attack into, as Deadpool will teleport to an enemy and follow up with a slash. And this is an attack that you can rinse and repeat by repeatedly pressing the attack button. The drawback with this is because he does teleport all over the place, it is incapable of synergizing with any other teammate abilities. So it's decent on the damage front, relatively conservative on the EP usage, but it is an absolutely terrible attack on the front of doing damage to the stagger gauge. It has the piercing attack type, which makes sense given that we have two long swords and there's not really a slashing attack type that's attributed, so piercing is about as close as we can get. And as you continue to rank this attack up, you will notice that it has a reduced energy point consumption, an increased attack damage, an increased amount of damage dealt to the stagger gauge, as well as reducing the chance of the attack being interrupted. Deadpool's second ability is the Eat Lead ability, which is where Deadpool will fire two SMGs out in front of the character, and you can kind of manipulate both the stream of bullets as they are fired out, as well as holistically alter the direction of fire from those if you press into a separate direction when being used alone as a standard ability. Though Deadpool will auto-hone onto a target when this attack is used within a synergy context. And again, you can continue to use this attack over and over again based off of repeatedly pressing the button to consistently fire. This, where it is a gun type attack, does have the attack type projectile, and the synergy trait falls under the rapid fire category. This holds pretty consistent with the Slice and Dice ability, where it is decent on the damage front. It is relatively safe on the energy point consumption, and terrible to use against stagger gauges, especially where it's not highly directional, so you're going to miss hitting a lot of those characters as you attempt to lay the covering fire down onto them. That being said, as you rank up the attack, it does have a reduced energy point cost, increase in its attack damage, and increase to the damage done to the stagger gauge, as well as a reduced chance of the attack being interrupted. Deadpool's third ability is very different from any other ability in this category that we've ever seen. It's the ability Make It Rain, and this involves Deadpool spreading timed bombs in the vicinity, but he is locked into a celebratory animation complete with confetti as this attack is carried out. With other characters that have this time bomb type attack, they do gain the freedom to move around in the brief interim before the bombs explode, but not the case with Deadpool. It is an energy type attack with the synergy trait Explosive, and is a little bit better than some of his other attacks in terms of bolt damage and damage done to the stagger gauge, as well as remaining fairly consistent with what we've seen so far in its energy point consumption. As this attack is leveled up, it will have a reduced energy point cost, have an increase rewarded to its attack damage and to the stagger gauge damage, as well as finally having that reduced chance of the attack being interrupted. The fourth and final ability that Deadpool has access to is the Katana-rama, and must be said emphatically because that attack does indeed have an exclamation point at the end. The Katanarama sends Deadpool rushing forward in a spinning sword attack. This will instantly detonate in both the standard ability usage as well as the synergy attack type, no matter where it's used. And this is one of Deadpool's best abilities for overall damage output, as it has a B classification in overall damage and A classification in the stagger damage category, making it the best tool in Deadpool's kit for bursting down the mighty enemies and mini-boss characters, and remaining as consistent as the rest of his abilities in terms of the energy point consumption. It has a piercing attack type and a synergy trait charge, as Deadpool does launch himself forward in a spinning frenzy. And as the Katanarama is ranked up, it is rewarded with reduced energy point consumption, an increase to attack damage, an increase to stagger damage dealt, and finally a reduced chance of the attack being interrupted. And last but certainly not least, we have Deadpool's extreme attack. This is a very lengthy attack animation, taking 7.5 seconds to run its full completion, but it does have a wide array of effect in kind of a cone area out in front of Deadpool. It starts with him initiating a rocket launcher barrage of attacks that explode out in that area, and is finalized with a couple of hand-lit and tossed dynamite explosions that go out into that same general area. When detonating this attack, spacing is of the utmost importance. Deadpool will not turn around to acknowledge the correct area of attack if there are a couple of different opponents in the arena. So if you are just rapid clicking through and trying to detonate this attack as quickly as you can easily send this entire attack careening off into a wall and dealing no damage to any enemies on the battlefield. So be very cautious when detonating this attack, and be sure that you are facing towards the enemies that you are attempting to take down when using it. Apart from that, you're bound to get some pretty nice damage out of it. So now that we've looked at everything that Deadpool has to offer and brings to the table, we need to find him a place within the ranked tier list. And as you can see, there have been several competitors before him, some that have done very, very well, others not so much. So where does Deadpool fit in? Well, he's decent in the traversal side of things, has a decently reliable set of attacks in both his standard basic attacks and some quirky, if not endearing, abilities that all around do him pretty well. So I can't put him very high on this list based off his overall performance and viability, but he has earned himself a very solid place in the B tier. So we will go ahead and place him right there, and he'll probably remain in the upper end of that B tier, especially because I am organizing these characters based off of viability within those tiers, or the tiers are ranked as well. So what do you think of the ranking in today's video? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there anything you feel that I missed or glossed over about Deadpool? Let me know in the comments down below, and be sure to check back next week for the next installment, and tomorrow for a brand new video on Miles Morales for PlayStation 4 and 5. Until then, thanks again for watching, and I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day.